Needs Assessment. This is Part 3 of the series on Front-End Analysis by Dr. Catherine P. Fulford, Professor, University of Hawaii at Manoa. We're going to start with what I call an alpha level needs activity. What I'd like you to do is take a piece of paper and you're going to draw 3 columns. The first one, means or solutions. On the second column, products or symptoms. On the third column, ends, alpha level needs and outcomes. Once you do this, I'm going to give you a set of words, and I'm going to ask you to place those words in these 3 columns. Okay, here are the words. Place those words in these 3 columns. You can pause the recording to do this. Okay, we're back. What you're going to do now is to continue to move things as you watch. So, if you thought something was an outcome, but now you think it's a symptom or a product, you can change your placement of the words. See how your ideas shift as you watch the program. To begin, front-end analysis. As an instructional designer, you do this step before you make purchases or design and develop instruction. It helps you determine the real problem so that the solutions you choose solve the problem. We started in Part 1 with systems analysis and looked at system charts and descriptions. Next, we looked at change analysis and how to do a dissemination and diffusion plan. In this video, we will look at needs assessment and problem analysis. This is also known as needs analysis. Let's think about needs assessment types. First, there's open-ended needs assessment. Next, there's a focused needs assessment. You need to determine which of these is the best for your organization. In an open-ended needs assessment, you examine current problems and seek solutions. It takes more time and resources. There's less potential for bias because you don't already have a problem and solution in mind. But there's more potential for finding problems that you didn't know existed, but more potential for creative solutions. A focused needs assessment is to evaluate current or proposed solutions. It takes less time and resources, but there's more potential for bias because you already have chosen some solutions. There's more potential to confirm what you knew. The problem is, surprises can sometimes lead to stress. So let's think of an action plan to produce a needs assessment. First, we gather information, then we identify discrepancies, then conduct a task analysis, identify constraints and resources, identify learner characteristics, write a needs or problem statement, and then identify goals. In this video, we'll talk about gather information, identify discrepancies, and write a needs or problem statement. In the next video, we'll talk about the other 4. Look at the confusion everywhere. Opinions are often really solutions in search of a problem. It is obvious that most of the time when we use the word need, we jump right over other possible means or options. We lock ourselves into a solution that might not be the best one to reach the desired end. So how do we figure out what our means and ends are? Here's a practical example. Here we have feet, bicycle, scooter, motorcycle, camper truck, and economy car. So what are our ends? The ends are transportation for work or pleasure. What about these? Rolls-Royce, Mercedes, Jaguar, sailing yacht, premium RV, private plane. These are for transportation, but they're also for status. And there's sometimes when status counts, and sometimes when it doesn't. You have to decide which ends are the most important, but which means will solve the problem best. You want to avoid painting yourself into a corner. Many of us confuse means and ends, especially when we use the word need that are means rather than ends. We often jump to premature solutions and get into problems over our heads. Step 1 is to gather information. There are a number of ways to do this. You can do a literature review and interviews, focus groups, surveys, the Delphi technique, the critical incident technique, and the fault tree analysis. See the reference by Gentry to find out more about these. Step 2 is to identify discrepancies. The way we're going to do this is with Kaufman's categories of organizational needs. Inputs, processes, products, outputs, and outcomes have to be determined. The first of these are inputs. These are things or people that go into the system, or the means, such as money, time, buildings, teachers, learners, goals, objectives, policies, curriculum, materials, and equipment. Next are processes. These are ways of doing things, methods, or techniques, such as administration, staffing patterns, professional development, curriculum development, teaching methods, standards-based learning, and technology integration. Next are the products. These are what come out of the system, accomplishments or things, such as, for the organization, new curriculum materials, or a new technology plan, or for the student, assignments completed, passed tests, courses completed, or an electronic portfolio. Next are outputs. These are our short-term results, such as teachers with new skills, certified completion of graduates, students with job entry skills, and students with licenses. Our long-term results are our alpha level ends, such as motivated and successful faculty and graduates that are self-sufficient and contributing members of society. One of the best tools for figuring out discrepancies is Kaufman's Discrepancy Chart. First, you try to determine what is in the organization. What kind of outputs and outcomes are you getting? Next, you want to figure out what outcomes and outputs that you want to be getting. The inputs, processes, and products that you list are the discrepancies, or the gap between what is and what should be. The new inputs, processes, and products provide helpful hints for solutions that might be implemented to get to what should be. Now I'd like to show you some examples of discrepancy charts from student papers. When I'm doing a discrepancy chart, I prefer to start with the outcomes and outputs. Okay, first the outcomes. Currently, teachers are unprepared to teach, students receive inadequate instruction, students are not prepared for college or a job. In our what should be column, our desired outcomes are that teachers are well prepared, students receive consistent, high-quality instruction, and that students are prepared to pursue college or jobs. That sounds great. So what are our outputs in these categories? So we can actually put percentages here. Here we've got 18% of the students meet the standards. Ooh, that's low. 65% of ninth graders graduate on time. 28% of teachers understand the standards. What we're looking for is 100% of the students meet the standards by 2014, 100% of the students graduate on time by 2014, and 100% of the teachers understand the standards. So what are our current inputs? We see that we have standardized test scores. We also have content and performance standards, as well as summative assessments. What should be, there should be multiple measures of student progress, training in how to interpret the standards, and summative and formative assessments. Processes. Currently, there's a fragmented process of professional development for teachers. The system of standards is unclear to teachers, and instruction is not currently linked to assessment. What should be? There should be a consistent and cohesive professional development process. There should be a clarification system of standards, and instruction should be informed by student assessment. What are our current products? There are many unrelated professional development modules and many uncoordinated professional development centers. Curriculum is not currently aligned with their standards. In what should be, an organized, comprehensive professional development package should exist. A single center should be developed for professional development. The curriculum should be aligned with standards. Now, of course, this discrepancy chart could be a lot more detailed, but for a start, it really is well focused, has good detail, and some good specific outputs. Okay, let's look at a discrepancy chart that's poorly done. Outcomes. Students don't have access to mobile learning technologies, and the use of mobile technologies are blocked in schools. These don't really look like outcomes to me, nor do these in the what should be category. Do students really need mobile technologies to learn? No, those are probably means to an end. They certainly might make things better, and they might provide more access to students. But what is the real thing that we're looking for here? Outputs. Again, we're very focused on mobile technologies, and I haven't seen anything about learning yet. These are actually processes rather than outputs. Let's look at the inputs. There's variable support from teachers, inequitable provision of mobile devices. We're still very focused on the technology piece here and not on the true outcome. In terms of what should be, There's an enthusiastic approach to mobile learning and equitable provision of mobile devices. Processes. There's no training on mobile learning. At least now we're out of mobile learning. There's an internal communication breakdown and no systematic and regular review of equipment. Those are legitimate processes, but again, everything seems so focused on mobile technologies, we really haven't gotten out of that box. One thing I also notice about this, there are only 2 items in most of the cells. There really should be a number of different things if we are truly to find our solution. Okay, so let's look at all the problems. First of all, it's not at alpha level. In other words, our outcomes and outputs are not very meaningful and they're solution focused. We have some elements in the wrong categories. There needs to be at least 3 to 5 aspects in each cell, and each could be more specific and detailed. Okay, let's take a look at another good example. Our current outcomes are that students don't have the skills to be competitive in today's job market. Students are not prepared for college and jobs, and the school is not thriving and modern. What we'd like to be is that students are well prepared for employment competition, students are prepared for college and jobs, and the school is thriving and modern. Our outputs in this case are that most teachers are unaware of currently available resources, and students have few courses using technology, and teachers feel pressure to stay up to date. Our what should be is that teachers are using multiple resources to design appropriate learning, students experience a technology-rich curriculum, and teachers stay up to date. With our inputs, in terms of what is that there's no support for teachers to integrate technology. There are inequitable resources for teachers across the system, and we have uninterested teacher attitudes. Of course, what should be is an enthusiastic approach to technology, equitable resources for teacher, and innovative teacher attitudes. In terms of processes, there's currently no coordination of professional development, there's an internal communication breakdown, no systematic and regular review of resource content. What should be is promoting resources to the educational community, regular communication, and systematic and regular review of the resources. In terms of products, right now there's a small video database of local teachers using technology. A valuable resource is underutilized by the teachers, and there's a lack of vision of technology use. What should be is a large video database featuring highly reputable teachers, utilized resources by a majority of teachers within the system, and a clear vision of technology use. You might have noticed this is actually a rewrite of the previous one. Notice that this one is now well-focused, has good detail, good placement, and is at the alpha level. It's a much better analysis of the situation. Instead of being focused on mobile learning, it's focused more generally on technology. We have to be careful, though. Even technology can get us into a trap because it is a means. So, if you stop your video and go back to the other one, you can compare the two. Next, I'd like to tell you a story. This is a story about 3 children who wanted an orange. They were fighting over this single orange when their father came in. There was only one, and they all wanted it. So what should he do? He grabbed the orange, he took a knife, and he cut it into 3 pieces. They were all very unhappy. He seemed to think that that was fair. But let's take a look. The youngest child wanted the seeds of the orange to be able to grow a plant. The middle child wanted the rinds to be able to make a cake. And the teenage son wanted the whole orange as a snack, because a third of an orange is not much of a snack for a growing boy. So, none of them got what they wanted, and they were dissatisfied. If the father would have sat down and determined really what do they need, he might have had a clear answer, and everybody could have been happy. So, that's where you start. You don't just draw straws to see what everybody gets. You've really got to come up with ideas of what people really need. So let's take a look at another story. Once there were another 3 children, and there were 3 pastries. The question is, should we give them out evenly, 1 each? Or what do we need to know to be able to make it equal rather than even? To make it equal, we would have to cut each one into 3 pieces. Why? Because it turns out they're 3 different flavors. And if we gave mincemeat to somebody who didn't like it, that would not be equal. So, to make it equal, we have to cut each into 3 parts. The thing is, though, that 2 of the boys are little and 1 of them is grown. So we have to ask ourselves, Is this fair? So even, equal, and fair are three different concepts, and we need to think about this when we're talking about solutions, especially when they fall across various populations. Now we're going to jump over the other steps to step 6, to write a needs and problem statement, or the focused results of our needs assessment. It should be clear in terms of what is and what should be. It should analyze the gap or the discrepancy. It should be at the alpha level, that is, stated as long-term outcomes instead of short-term solutions. And if it doesn't have to do with living things, it's probably not alpha. By the way, if you notice the note to the right, alpha is a term that was used by Roger Kaufman in his courses in 1978. I was one of his students. Okay, so let's take a look at these stated needs. This is not alpha. I consider it maybe delta. We need more computers. What kind shall we buy? It's a question we hear a lot these days. But is it really getting at the problem? Is it a good solution when we haven't even discovered what the problem is? Here's another one. Learners need to know more about computers. How can we give them more training? Again, this is very solution-focused. It's a little better because it focuses on the people rather than the equipment. Okay, so what would alpha look like? Alpha. Learners should be able to use tools that make learning and working efficient and effective. What do they need to be able to do? And this is the question that's going to help us find the right solution. Technology is changing daily, and anything we decide on, it may turn out to be just a quick fix that doesn't solve the problem in the long run. So we better really think about it, or we'll waste a lot of money, effort, and human resources. Let's think about it in more personal terms. Sometimes that helps us to get a better perspective. I think a lot of us say this: I need more time. The question is, can we have more time? You know, I put in a request a long time ago for an 8th day, but it hasn't been forthcoming. How about this? I need to be more organized. That's a good idea. The problem is when you have too many tasks for one human being, it's not possible to get everything done. So here's the alpha. I need to recognize what's important and set my priorities accordingly. So it's a good way to think about the reality of alpha level needs. Maslow's hierarchy is a good way to think about needs. It was developed by Maslow in 1943 and has long been a standing theory. It includes physiological needs, which are those things like air, water, and the food that we eat. It's our very survival. The idea in Maslow's hierarchy that until these needs are met, you can't go to the next level. Our next level here is safety. This would have to do with making sure that you have enough money to meet your physiological needs, making sure that you have a roof over your head to protect you from the weather, and other kinds of things like that. Next is your social needs. This has to do with a sense of belonging and love and caring. It's community and communication. Next is self-esteem. This has to do with how you feel about yourself and the recognition that you get for the things that you do. Next is self-actualization. This is what we are hoping to become. Many of us are constantly on a search for this. Let's look at how those things have to do with schooling and education. If you think about those physiological needs, one of the reasons for starting the breakfast and lunch programs in schools was to meet this need. The idea was that students couldn't think if they were hungry. Safety is another issue that's highly important in schools these days. It's hard to think and do your work if somebody might be sitting next to you with a gun. Social needs. I never will forget at puberty, 7th grade, teachers asking us to get up in front of the class and recite a poem. It was fine for me, but this was hard on a lot of other students. It seems like we could have paid much more attention to the social needs of students at that age. Then there's self-esteem. Self-esteem has become very important in the last few years in terms of children and their upbringing. And yes, while it's important, according to Maslow, if we haven't met the other needs, then we might have trouble even meeting their self-esteem needs. Interestingly, it seems to me that self-actualization is what we mostly focus on in schools. This is where we're seeking for self. It seems that when I went away to college, and especially when I got my PhD, that's when I was really doing self-actualization, and those subjects that I'd been taught in school suddenly became interesting. It does make me wonder sometimes if we're focusing on the wrong things in schools. Just something to think about. Next is the ERG Theory by Alderfer in 1969. He started studying Maslow's needs hierarchy and he found some differences, and he redesigned this hierarchy into 3 parts. First part he called existence, and it had safety and physiological together. Next, he said there's relatedness, which was the social category. And last, he put together self-actualization and self-esteem into a category called growth, thereby the ERG theory. His idea was that these were not fixed, and you didn't necessarily have to have one to have the other. In other words, it's not necessarily a hierarchy, and he talked about the starving artist theory. In other words, somebody is willing to starve so that they can grow. So either of these give you an idea of looking at needs and potential outcomes when you are working on your discrepancy chart as well as your alpha level need statement. Okay, let's take a look at these a little bit more deeply. First of all, it's important to focus on outcomes, not solutions, when we write our problem statement. Consider the risk, the dangers, or difficulty in leaving the problem unsolved. Your problem statement should create an emotional impact. Make sure you avoid solutions that are mistaken as needs, such as training, teachers, instruction, resources, networks, computers, equipment, and money. If any of these words are in your problem statement except as a gap, then it's probably not correct. Make sure to use outcomes that describe needs. Things like competencies, knowledge, skills, attitudes, motivation, and communication. Use persuasive language. Your first paragraph is very important. Remember the primacy effect, where the first thing that you do is what is remembered the longest. And the last paragraph is also very important because the last thing you say is the next most important. Let's take a look and consider, is this a problem? Teenage pregnancy. The news media would have us think so. Is it a problem? Let me give you a second to think about that. It certainly seems as though it might be, but let's think about it. Who is supposed to be pregnant? If you look at times gone by, in many countries in the world, it's teenagers that are pregnant. So I ask again, is this a problem? The problem lies in the way that we view our society. We have advanced the age of adulthood in our country. So how do we solve the problem if we really only have a symptom and we don't understand clearly what the problem is? Let's look at this one, boys in gangs. We consider it a problem. The question is it? Boys tend to play in groups of 10 to 12. So it's natural for them to do this. We do have good gangs. We have football teams and Boy Scouts and all kinds of ways that boys can group together in gangs without being a problem. So again, we have to look at what the problem truly is before we can solve it. Okay, we're back to our alpha level needs activity. So you may want to pause the video and go back and think about if you've put things in the wrong places. Okay, here are the answers. In our means column, we have recycling, computers, funding, training, mentoring, standards-based learning, and pollution controls. I think a lot of times we think of something like recycling as an ends, but truly, it's really a means to deal with our large amount of waste. What if we just didn't have waste to begin with? Perhaps that's a better solution. Less packaging, fewer newspapers, and fewer phone books. So if we think of recycling as our ends, we might wind up in the wrong place. Okay, what about our products or symptoms? Sick children, spoiled waterways, technological capability, job skills, graduates, low achievement, broken equipment, successful website, students meeting standards, and ability to read. All of these are either products or symptoms. Graduates, that's a product of our educational system. But why do we need to graduate in the first place? Let's look at the next column. These are our ends or alpha level needs or outcomes. Things like healthy teeth and gums, a clean environment, self-sufficient people, contributing people, good communication, success in today's workplace. These are alpha level needs. Graduates, for example, as a product, leads to self-sufficient and contributing people. I hope you have the idea now. Remember, needs assessment is about teamwork and creating a good action plan, where you gather information, identify discrepancies, conduct a performance analysis, look at your constraints and resources, analyze your learner characteristics, write your problem statement, and identify goals. In our next video, we'll continue and finish up our action plan. To learn more, check out these references.